And I don't think most people like this. In fact, if you look at the polling and you look at the protests right now and you look at the town halls, Americans are waking up to that. They don't like it. That's why a Democrat took a state Senate seat this week in a Pennsylvania district that had been Republican held since 1979 in Lancaster, the heart of Amish country. And it is why Republicans are right now worried about a special election in the deep red Florida congressional district once held by Trump National Security Advisor Michael Waltz that he won by 30 points in the last election. And it is why Trump just pulled his nomination of Congresswoman Elise Stefanik to be UN ambassador, because he is worried about losing a special election in a district where she won last year by 24 points. So he needs her in Congress.
Lately, the folks at the Fox Propaganda Network have been facing some serious challenges. Not only are their top MAGA hosts struggling to defend Donald Trump, but there's also noticeable tension growing on their panels. Infighting seems to be breaking out more frequently, particularly between the more liberal-leaning hosts, which is surprising for Fox, and the hardcore MAGA crowd. This all came to a head with a heated argument on air between two of their hosts, which we'll get into shortly. But before we dive into that, I'd appreciate it if you could give this video a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. It really helps and means a lot to me. Now, to set the stage for the Fox showdown, we need to first look at a Republican voter who, much like many Fox hosts, is feeling betrayed and frustrated with Donald Trump.
He's a good boy.
Pigott was abruptly fired last month from the Treasury Department's Bureau of Fiscal Service, based here in Parkersburg, West Virginia. The reason given for the firings of 125 probationary employees at the Bureau? Poor performance.
I had my last review on the 31st of January, and I had the highest rating that you can get on a review, less than 21 days before I was terminated for my performance.
You voted for Donald Trump.
I did.
Do you regret that vote?
Yes, I do. To cut the knees out of the working class Americans just doesn't make sense to me. I expected more from President Donald Trump.
Since speaking out, Pigott says she's received death threats and her home has been egged. This woman asked us not to show her face for fear of retribution. She recently retired from the Bureau of Fiscal Service because she was afraid of losing her health insurance if she was fired. She also voted for Trump.
Would you still have supported him?
I'm not sure that I would have. The way that it's been done, I'm for balancing the budget, that type of thing, but not in this context. It's just not right.
Honestly, I've changed my mind on how I feel about these Trump voters who say they regret their vote. At first, I was sad that such terrible things were happening to people who, of course, deserve their jobs in the federal government and were doing important jobs well. But now I'm just like, I don't know, you voted for it, actually. And what I'd really like to hear is, yes, I regret my vote, and therefore... And so, and for that reason, right, I'm going to vote for Democrats for the next 5 decades for the rest of my life to right the wrong that has been the Donald Trump presidency that I fully endorsed and supported. That is what I would like to hear out of these people, not just, oh, that was a big mistake. Well, what are you going to do about it? Well, clearly, there was something being done about it every single day on Fox a little bit more and more, which is kind of shocking. But one of the more liberal hosts on Fox decided it was time to call out our colleagues, and we're going to get to that in just a second. But it started with her calling out Donald Trump.
I think Democrats should focus on isn't something like this. It's the fact that Marco Rubio seems to have done away with due process for people in the U.S. legally, on legal visas, student and otherwise, who many of which have now been taken off the streets, disappeared. People, they can't get in touch with their lawyers. He hasn't outlined why they are being held. I think that's a much bigger crisis with our immigration system than deporting an illegal immigrant who's dealing fentanyl. And politically, Democrats need to be very careful about not falling into some of these traps and taking the bait and focusing on what we think the real unconstitutional, which courts have now said, things that the Trump administration is doing. This is not the problem, although I think it's in poor taste.
The president does have wide latitude to take back student visas. You do not get the full panoply of rights as someone here on a student visa. You get a modicum, not the full panoply.
Yeah, I have no empathy or for anyone coming to the United States when we've invited them
who have terrorist sympathies, which is the government has accused many of these visa holders as having. So I have no sympathy for those individuals. I also have no sympathy.
I feel like there hasn't been nearly enough attention given to these illegal deportations and the disappearance of students happening across the country. We've seen it with individuals like Mud Kill at Columbia and a student at Tufts University, and it's happening everywhere. People are being detained for things like opinion pieces they've written or peaceful protests they've participated in. They're being snatched up and moved to detention centers in different states without any clear explanation or any law they've broken being pointed to. There's no real reason given for their arrest. And yet, the so-called defenders of free speech remain completely silent. They don't care because they never truly believed in what they were preaching. The free speech they care about is the freedom to be antisocial and weird, like many MAGA folks tend to be. That's what they're really upset about. It was never about free speech. If it were, they'd show more concern for things like veterans, but they don't, which is exactly how the screaming match on Fox erupted when a liberal host called this out.
But all of her evaluations from her managers have been stellar, the highest you can get. And yet she was fired by DOJ for poor performance, because legally that's the only way they can fire people who are probationary, by saying it's for poor performance. So there's a flip side to this. Do you balance the budget and cut the deficit by actually tackling entitlements, by looking at these tax cuts, much of which go to high-income earners? Or do you do what DOJ is doing, which is Larry, let me finish, I didn't interrupt you. Or do you do it by what DOJ is doing, which is firing veterans at the VA, people who work curing cancer and working on vaccines, right? They are going after government employees who make 50,000. But Kayleigh, those are real Americans.
And to Larry's point,
and they are getting, let me
everyone got a
finish.
tax break all the way down to the lowest.
Kayleigh, those are real Americans, and they are getting fired, and many of them supported Donald Trump. And so politically and morally, at the end of this,
so where do you want to cut, Marie?
We will all,
Marie, where do you want
I
to cut?
think there's a lot you can, first of all, I don't think that these tax cuts for the wealthy
by
should
definition
be.
is a short-term period. It's a trial period.
But Lisa, you can't be fired
That's
by,
the whole point
by
of a
someone's
probationary employee.
But in probation, the only way you can be fired is by saying you are poorly performing, and these people are not.
But Marie,
these people
Marie,
are
where's
not.
the Democrat cutting package? Like, where's the proposal?
I can name 5 places we should cut.
Here's the
And
point.
do you think it's fair for America's toddlers to be saddled
Do you think it's fair for veterans to be fired by Elon Musk? Do you think that's okay? Do we all think that's okay?
Look, the GAO, General Accounting Office.
Do we all think that's okay? Are you okay
year,
with that, Larry?
Listen, the GAO last year came up with the number of $535 billion in waste, fraud, and abuse. That's the GAO. That was during the Biden years. The GAO this year came up with a number, another $135 billion. What Elon Musk is discovering is no secret. The problem, Marie, is simply this. All these studies have been gathering dust on the shelves, and they have not been used actually to be implemented.
That's not what they're getting rid of. They're not getting rid of waste. That's not what they're cutting.
And you're on the wrong side of an 80-20 issue.
That's not what they're cutting.
We can bring up an anecdotal account from another network, and we can also bring up the 0.15% number of those who have actually been fired. And we can bring up the fact that Democrats have yet to put forward a plan to cut spending. Instead, they would like for my 2-year-old and 5-year-old to pay their debts. Ask yourself if that's fair.
What is possibly some, I don't even understand the point by Kay Mackin any here. What is she arguing that we need to fire more veterans? I'm confused. The explanations out of DOJ, if you can even call them, that have been explicitly and intentionally vague and contrary to the actual reporting on job performance. Within these agencies, these people are being fired for no good reason, especially veterans, and they just don't seem to care. It was something that we've always heard Republicans say along the lines of Ukraine. We need to stop sending that money abroad. We need to spend it on our troops at home. Has that happened? I'm looking around for the increased funding to the VA to make sure we don't have homeless vets, make sure they're fed, have opportunities in the workforce. No, the opposite has in fact happened. Veterans are essentially being targeted by the Trump administration, is what you're meaning to tell me. And this liberal Fox host is the one who's wrong for calling it out. That seems absurd, but it is happening on Fox. They are indiscriminately firing people. And it feels like, as I said, intentionally, veterans for God knows why. And MAG is coming to their defense. That's what they're focused on, firing the veterans. Well, they're also focused on really important stuff, actually. I shouldn't say that, J.D. Vance is cracking down on woke. Zoe? Yeah, Chris Hayes gave a great report on this. The stupidity of the Trump administration has reached a new level. Take a look.
Makes us who we are. An assault on the institutions and practices that make America America. The kind of place where, for instance, a university can host a lecture on humanitarian action by the former president of Doctors Without Borders and not have to cancel it because it might be too anti-Trump. And yet, that did happen in this country this week at NYU. The speaker says her lecture was canceled because the university administration feared her talk would be perceived as anti-government in the United States of America. Or the kind of country where, say, a student can co-author a measured, fact-based op-ed critical of a U.S. ally and not have the mass secret police snatch her off the street into detention, accused of ties to terror groups, and shipped away to another state in violation of a direct court order. A place where law firms can defend whatever client they want to in cases where they sue the government without fear of being crushed by the government. A country where dinner with the president isn't just sold to the highest bidder and the state isn't just used as a valuable tool to reward loyalists and punish perceived enemies. That is all fundamentally un-American. If there is an organizing principle of MAGA governance, is that they do not like anything they cannot control. And that is the opposite of a free society. To them, you will obey or you will be hunted. And every day there's a new example, as they just try to remake everything that is part of a free society, not under their control, down to museums and zoos. Yes, zoos. Do you catch this one? That was in the utterly insane executive order Trump signed yesterday, directing Vice President J.D. Vance to crack down on the Smithsonian Institution by removing improper ideology from its museums, education and research centers, and the zoo. J.D. Vance is now going to patrol the zoo for improper ideology. Congratulations, Commissar. You've got the zoo portfolio. Yeah, it's absurd and it's un-American. And I don't think most people like this. In fact, if you look at the polling and you look at the protests right now and you look at the town halls, Americans are waking up to that. They don't like it. That's why a Democrat took a state Senate seat this week in a Pennsylvania district that had been Republican held since 1979 in Lancaster, the heart of Amish country. And it is why Republicans are right now worried about a special election in the deep red Florida congressional district once held by Trump National Security Advisor Michael Waltz that he won by 30 points in the last election. And it is why Trump just pulled his nomination of Congresswoman Elise Stefanik to be UN ambassador, because he is worried about losing a special election in a district where she won last year by 24 points. So he needs her in Congress. All of this means we still do right now live in a free society. We still do live in a democracy where gravity, political gravity exists. Elections can still blunt Donald Trump's attempts at dictatorship. And the question before us each and every day is whether enough people understand the stakes here to mobilize in time to stop him.
Oh gosh, these are the worst people in the world. They're ridiculous. They have no place in our government. We got to call them out every single day. We're doing it on this show. If you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and if you stuck around at the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.